Weiss was excited. She knew she shouldn't be. Such emotions weren't suitable for a Schnee. That was what her father used to say. Winter had taken her aside when she was younger and helped the impressionable girl understand things better. Such emotions weren't suitable for a Schnee to show publicly. They made it look like they were immature or prone to rash decisions. A Schnee was less human than anyone else, yet they could not afford to be seen as such. Weiss had probably failed this morning, but Winter was not around and she couldn't help it. The Vital Festival was coming to Vale. "Isn't this incredible?" she asked, feeling Winter's stern look even over the thousands of miles between them. "Look at all the preparation that is being undertaken. Look at the streamers and the decorations. They even started to import flowers from Vaco and Mistral, just to make the tourists feel more at home." "Yeah, looks nice." Yang yawned, and Blake wasn't even looking. Jean was picking his nose. Truly, her team was the worst. It was a Saturday. They were all out in Vale and the sun was shining. One might have forgiven Weiss for assuming her team would have been in a better spirits. "What is wrong with you all?" Weiss stopped and placed both hands on her hips. "You've all been near silent since you've woken up." Yang flinched. Yeah, sorry, just distracted. I didn't sleep so well," Blake said with a small shrug. And Jean worked his finger even higher. No doubt he was searching for his brain. Sometimes Weiss wanted to just freeze them all into solid blocks of ice. That or put herself in for counseling, because she was going to need it after spending 4 years with these people. Yesterday had been difficult enough, what with dealing with Yang, who had taken her dressing down by Miss Goodwitch far too personal. It had taken Weiss a good hour or so to calm her down. The girl's melodramatics coming to an end only when Weiss had lost her patience and slapped some sense into the girl with some well-placed words. Yang had made a mistake, sure, but that wasn't why they were at Beacon. Mistakes were the best way of learning, and this one hadn't even hurt anyone. Better to mess up now and learn from it, than do it later and suffer the consequences. Yang had started to cheer up after that, thankfully, but she was clearly still a little disappointed in herself. That was fine. It would make sure she didn't make the same mistake next time. But Blake? Ugh. That girl was a nightmare to try and understand. One moment she'd run off talking about how she was going to find Jean and make him apologize. But then Jean had returned on his own, with Blake appearing a good 10 minutes later. The black-haired girl hadn't said anything since she had gone to bed pretty early, which was why the whole no sleep nonsense was just that. Nonsense. I'm not paid enough for this. As for Jean, well, actually he was acting pretty much normal. He barely paid attention and otherwise annoyed her to the point that she wanted to drag his finger from his nose and slap him with it. It was perfectly normal behavior for him. "You didn't have to come all the way to Vale with me if you didn't want to." Weiss sighed. "I just thought it might be nice to see all the different cultural influences combined in one place." "Really?" Jean asked, apparently having found enlightenment or whatever else was trapped up there. He wiped his finger on his jeans, making Weiss twitch violently. "I thought you just wanted to spy on the competition." "What? No?" Curse her stammer. Since when did he actually pay attention to her, let alone become familiar enough to read into her motives? "And what makes you think that?" "Most likely the fact we're at the docks." Yang laughed. "And not the marketplace or the main street." It was fairly obvious. Blake had a tiny smile on her face. "Well, you're all wrong." Weiss spun around with a huff. "I suppose it's only natural that such cynical people as you would lump me in with—" "There's one of the competitors," Jean interrupted. Where? Weiss's hand slammed down on the railing as she stared at the ship. Yang mumbled something, but Weiss was too busy straining to spot one of the foreign teams, she couldn't see anything. other than some figures on the main deck who appeared to be chasing after someone. It looked like they were running after a person. Someone who was able to vault over the side of the ship, landing in a roll before jogging away with ease. Somebody quickly stopped that stowaway. One of the guards atop the ship yelled. As one might have expected, nobody did. Had Weiss been closer, she might have tried. But no typical member of the public was going to feel confident enough to tackle someone like that. There was no telling how dangerous they might be. "There's your competition, Weiss screamed," Yang said, distracting Weiss at the exact moment the blonde teen sprinted by them. By the time Weiss had turned back around, he had already rushed past and was disappearing into the crowds. Weiss stopped 1 foot angrily. "We have to follow him." "Do we though? Do we really?" Jean sighed, only to go ignored as Weiss grabbed his arm and dragged him after her. Apart from being a criminal, this guy was also a potential combatant in the Vital Festival, which meant she needed to determine just why he was breaking his way onto a ship of all things. Something like that could have damaged the reputation of hunters everywhere. He was fast, however, far faster than the 4 of them, especially since he seemed more than willing to duck dangerously in and out of crowds, while Weiss didn't want to knock anyone down. There was a close call at one point, where she might have even ran into a strange-looking orange-haired girl. The partner pushed her aside at the last second, giving Weiss just the space she needed to avoid the girl and shout a quick apology. The odd girl shouted out a hello back, but Weiss had already rushed off at that point. She came to a top of the next intersection with a heavy pant. Drat. He'd gotten away. Yang and Blake caught up a second later, while Jean was bringing up the rear as usual. Weiss sighed, accepting that the blonde faunus had managed to elude them this time. I'll make sure to give him a piece of my mind if he does turn out to be a competitor. Huh. What's happening over there? Weiss' gaze turned to Yang, who had pointed out some disturbance across the road. There was a small crowd of people outside what looked to be a trashed and broken storefront. The glass was smashed, some of the shards still littering the pavement outside. Bright plastic tape condoned off the area, while random passerbys hovered at the outside, eager for gossip. Weiss shared a look with Blake and Yang, before the 3 of them also headed over to take a look. Jean followed. Jamie's dust, that was what the sign above the smashed window depicted. It didn't take a genius to figure out what Jamie was selling. Weiss's frown deepened. Attacks and robberies like this were fairly common, and also a big problem for their family. Dust was a valuable commodity, untraceable, easy to transport, and most of all, expensive. In some criminal circles it was as much currency as line, and of course, even though this hadn't been stolen from her family directly, every dust outlet hit was a bad thing for the SDC. Sure, Jamie might claim insurance and use that to buy more off them, but he might also close down his store, robbing the SDC of a client. "It's Feng," one of the officers on site said, catching their team's attention. "They've been hitting dust stores left, right, and center. The city is going to the dogs." The other one grinned. Literally in some cases. "Saw the footage too? You'll never guess who I caught them with." The first officer leaned in to whisper something into the other's ear. Weiss strained to hear, but she was denied. "You serious? Torchwick?" "Shh, quiet." The older one slammed his hand over the young man's mouth, nodding over to the civilians nearby. Weiss didn't care to listen for any more. She had heard enough already. Torchwick and the White Fang. Just what her family didn't need. Those blasted criminals had been a thorn in their side for so long, and now they were hitting the Vital Festival as well. It made sense. She couldn't say otherwise. The amount of line and dust that would be flowing through the city at such a time would be phenomenal, not to mention the increased crowds in the streets. All of the celebrities. It didn't take a genius to see it would be a prime opportunity to get away with some high-scale theft. She would have to send a message to Winter later. Her older sister would ensure it got back to their father and the SDC Director of Security. Weiss wasn't quite ready to speak directly of her father. Not yet, anyway. I guess the festival brings good and bad, Yang said once they were away from the commotion. We shouldn't let it bother us. Good advice as far as Weiss was concerned. She was about to say as much, but for someone else beating her to it. It doesn't make sense, Blake said. Yang turned to her partner with an inquisitive look. The White Fang would never work with Roman Torchwick. They must have been mistaken. Why? Weiss asked with a shrug. They're all criminals. I don't see why they wouldn't work together. The White Fang aren't criminals, Blake denied. And they would never work with someone like Roman Torchwick. He's a monster. Weiss scoffed. I'd rather Torchwick than the White Fang. At least he just wants money and not the destruction of the human race. The White Fang aren't like that. The girl's yellow eyes glared at Weiss, enough so that she took a step back in alarm. That's just the media painting them as deranged terrorists. All they want is equality for funness. They have a funny way of showing it. I suppose a Schnee would think that. What was that? Guys? Yang stepped between them with an awkward laugh. Why are we even arguing about this? Ask your partner, Weiss said, glaring past the blonde, even as Blake glowered back. Look, all I did was point out that two criminal gangs might be working together. Basically just what the detectives at the crime scene said. And I said they had to be wrong. Blake growled back. They're just assuming without even knowing for sure. Didn't they say they had video evidence? Blake rolled her eyes. As though anyone couldn't wear a mask to fake it. There's plenty of people who hate Faunus. Torchwick might have done it just to get the suspicion off himself. Why? He's already the most wanted man in Vale and Atlas. It's a little late for him to be worrying about his image. Really? Why was Blake so adamant about this? It was just a bunch of criminals. It was their job as hunters to step in and stop people like that. You're just determined to make them the bad people in this. If the SDC didn't treat the Faunus workers so poorly, then the White Fang wouldn't be so angry. All they want is equality. Weiss rolled her eyes. Inequality existed long before our company. She said, we've just become the scapegoat because we're kind enough to even hire Faunus at all. Would you rather we stopped entirely and contributed to the Faunus unemployment problem in Atlas? I'd rather you actually paid them properly. Blake snapped. And stop treating Faunus like cheap labor you can throw away. It was the final straw. And I'd rather the White Fang stopped killing my family and friends. Weiss shouted back, loud enough not only did a few people turn to look at her, but Blake stepped back in shock. But I don't suppose I get that either, do I? Schnees didn't have friends. They had acquaintances, colleagues, and people who were used to them. That was how most people thought of them, cold and calculating, uncaring and pragmatic. Weiss wasn't so blind or deaf that she couldn't hear the maid's whispered words. Well, they were right. The Schnees didn't have friends. Because friends became targets. Friends became risk and people that could be taken advantage of. Weiss had friends. Once upon a time. What a boss. Yang thought as she watched her two friends continue to argue. The general consensus had been to give up on Vale once Yang had stepped in and pointed out just how loudly the two of them were arguing. They'd started to gather a crowd bigger than the robbery earlier, and that wasn't something Yang had been keen on. The journey back had been an awkward silence, punctured only by Yang's desperate attempts to spark a friendly conversation, each of which dissolved into silence the moment Weiss and Blake ended up looking at one another. Yang's efforts to engage her leader instead were met with her being ignored. What a day. And of course, once they made it back to their room, the gloves had come off. Now the blonde sat on her bed, head propped up by one hand beneath her chin, as she listened to Weiss and Blake yet argue again. I'm not saying the White Fang are blameless. Blake strode back and forth with arms crossed. Yang had never seen her partner so animated before. She just wished it was something other than pure rage. But you cannot assume that all fauners are degenerates based on the actions of a misunderstood minority. Misunderstood? Weiss laughed. A single bark of laughter that seemed to have Blake's teeth grinding together. It's a terrorist organization, Blake. I don't think you can get more misunderstood than that. There are plenty of people who are unhappy about the situation, but not many who decide bombing trains or promoting murder as a solution. Point to Weiss on that one, at least from Yang's point of view. She'd seen the newsreels. Well, maybe they're going about it the wrong way. Blake winced, but that doesn't change the fact that there's a problem to start with. The White Fang used to be a peaceful group. Clearly that approach wasn't working. Oh, they must have tried so hard. How long did it take to go from peaceful to violent? 4 years? It takes longer than that to change the minds of people and governments. Blake leaned back with a single, artfully raised eyebrow. Or maybe they noticed the changes happening in Atlas. She sniped. Changes that meant lower wages and safety laws for fauners. Changes promoted and lobbied for by your father's company. Ouch. Yang felt that one, even from where she sat. And that was definitely a point for Blake. Weiss recoiled, like she'd been slapped across the face. Even Yang had heard about the horrifying treatment fauners went through in the Snee Dutch mines. It was true someone had to do it, but you'd really have expected such backbreaking labor to be well paid and have plenty of safety nets for the workers. Even with that little information the government didn't suppress, Yang knew it wasn't. We're not talking about my family. I'm fully aware. Weiss shook her head. It's just not the point. The White Fang are terrorists and murderers, and I'm not getting into an argument with you about that. I don't care if you're a fauna sympathizer. That doesn't bother me, and I'll even praise you for it. But you don't get to say a bunch of monsters are misunderstood. A fauna sympathizer? Blake sighed. Congratulations on making that term sound dirty and foolish. They're not a completely different race, Weiss. Fauners are people, just like everyone else. Guys, please don't. Yang cut in. It's the weekend. Can't we just agree to disagree and move on? Blake and Weiss turned to look at her, and Yang struggled to keep her face neutral. It was a pretty explosive situation and she didn't want to get involved in it. She would have gone off and spent some time with Ruby if she wasn't worried what might happen in her absence. Blake and Weiss were both so proud, not to mention stubborn. Yang sighed. Well, what do you think? Blake asked, missing the point entirely and now dumping all over Yang as well as Weiss. I think it was a lovely day we could have spent in Vale. No, Weiss interrupted. I would like to hear your thoughts as well. I think I want to strangle you both right now, Yang thought. But of the two of them ganging up on her like this, she'd need to give some response. I think I don't know. Yang rolled her eyes but pushed on when it looked like they both might erupt. I've never been personally affected or involved with the White Fang, so I have no idea what to think. Yang turned to Blake. On the other hand, I can imagine how painful it might be to be targeted by someone like that. And I don't think it is right either. Weiss isn't her father, nor is she the SDC. If the White Fang has ever done anything to harm her, then it's completely disgusting. Blake wilted under Yang's patented big sister stare. I didn't say Weiss deserved it. She whispered. On the other hand, Yang spun back to Weiss before she could crow something to ruin everything. Blake is right when she says there's probably a good reason they've been targeting the SDC. And besides, you can't just assume every single faunus is a member of the White Fang. Weiss sighed, but didn't argue. Now can we put this behind us and start acting like a team again? Yang sighed. My entire Saturday has gone up in smoke. If you take Sunday, I swear there will be vengeance. That seemed to do the trick, if the way in which Blake and Weiss looked away was any sign. The tension in the room was still present, but muted. Hopefully the rest of the afternoon and a good night's sleep would get rid of it entirely. You've been pretty quiet about this. Weiss turned to her partner, who, true to the heiress's words, hadn't said much for the entire day. Yang thought she'd caught a few brief flashes of irritation from him, but if they had annoyed him as much as they had her, then he reined it in well. Maybe the fact that he had been stood, leaning against the wall with crossed arms should have been a clue. Yang didn't miss the way Blake flinched as John turned to look at the two of them. We've all shared our thoughts, Weiss continued. What about you? I don't think... Blake tried to interrupt nervously, but to Yang's surprise it was her partner who was cut off. I think they're scum. The clock on the wall of their dorm ticked ominously. Pardon? Blake choked, eyes wide. Yang winced, already wishing Weiss could have just kept silent and not asked the guy. Did I stutter? Jean asked, with more emotion in his voice than Yang thought she had ever heard. No. She could remember one time he had sounded like that, in the club, when he had told her to fuck off, when he had fought and held his own against her. He had been truly angry then. She had almost forgotten all about it. The White Fang are nothing but monsters disguised as people. They're misunderstood. He agreed, drawing a relieved sigh. It didn't last, but only because people believe them to be human or Faunus. In truth, they are worse than grim. At least those are mindless when they attack and kill innocent people. The White Fang know exactly what they're doing. They have no excuse. Yang stood up, quickly rushing over to stand between Jean and Blake. Her partner looked startled and more than a little frightened. And of the way their leader was acting, Yang could understand why. The emotion in his voice, the sheer tone of it. This wasn't the lazy man they were used to. Hey now. Yang laughed as she placed two hands on her leader's chest, trying to occupy his vision. He liked her, or at least considered her a friend, so she figured he might let her distract him. He didn't. Instead, he stared over the top of her head, using his height to his advantage. You can claim they're innocent, say that their reasons are just or they just want equality, but that doesn't change the fact that they will lie, they will steal, and if they get the chance, they will slaughter untold innocent people. They wouldn't do that, Blake shouted. It is the truth. Yang's eyes clenched shut as he roared. She could feel his chest heave against the palms of her hand, even as the resultant silence seemed to drown out all other noise. As Purple eyes cracked open, the first thing she saw was pure hatred in his normally calm eyes. Yang wanted to swallow, but she couldn't. Behind her, she heard Blake take a step back, even as she saw Weiss from the corner of her eye, pale eyes wide, mouth open. Deny it all you want, he whispered. You can hold on to your silly beliefs that they are redeemable, that they are being led astray, or that somehow this is all a stupid mistake. That doesn't change the truth, however. Lying to yourself never does. There was no real change in the atmosphere. He didn't step back, break eye contact, or change the way he spoke. But Yang could feel him take a deep breath, then release it in a silent sigh. But then you already know that, don't you, Blake? He had used her name. That should have been a sign for teasing or celebration. But such thoughts couldn't be further from any of their minds. Yang heard Blake's breath catch, saw Weiss's face crinkle in confusion. Yang didn't know what to say or do. How could she? She didn't have any personal experience about the issue at hand, as the three of them so obviously did. "I'm going out," Jean said. He stepped back and turned away, grabbing his uniform jacket from a chair. "I think I'll find somewhere else to sleep tonight." Yang flinched when the door slammed shut, even as his departure brought a little temperature back to the room. For the longest time, no one spoke. The only sound that of the ticking clock and their breathing. What did he mean? Weiss's eyes were narrowed, but her voice almost trembled. What did he mean when he said you knew? Yang turned in time to see her partner's wide eyes. Blake didn't answer. Instead, she took a frightened step back towards the door.